Captain Minho wiped the sweat from his palms as he walked through the enormous golden corridors of the Galactic Council building. The walls seemed to stretch forever upward, covered in strange symbols that glowed softly in the artificial light. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child, watching old science fiction movies with his grandmother back in Seoul. Now here he was, representing all of humanity in their first official meeting with alien civilizations. The other members of Earth's diplomatic team walked beside him, their faces showing the same mixture of excitement and terror that Minho felt in his stomach. Ambassador Su Jin had spent months preparing them for this day, running through every possible scenario, every cultural mistake they might make. "Remember," she had told them during their final briefing on the transport ship, "we only get one chance to make a first impression. The future of Earth depends on how we handle the next few hours." As they entered the main council chamber, Minho's breath caught in his throat. The room was massive, easily the size of 3 football stadiums put together. Floating platforms held representatives from species he had only seen in classified briefings. There were tall, thin beings with skin like tree bark, small, furry creatures, with too many arms, and others so strange that his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. The human delegation took their assigned seats near the center of the chamber. Minho tried to sit up straight and look confident. Even though his heart was beating so fast, he was sure everyone could hear it. The past 3 days of meetings had gone perfectly. They had signed preliminary trade agreements, established communication, protocols, and even arranged for cultural exchange programs. Everything was going according to plan. Then the massive doors at the far end of the chamber exploded open with a sound like thunder. The entire room fell silent instantly. Hundreds of alien beings stopped their conversations and turned to stare. Minho felt his mouth go dry as a figure strode into the chamber with the confidence of someone who owned the entire galaxy. Queen Nari of the Alterian Empire was the most beautiful and terrifying being Minho had ever seen. Her skin glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse with her emotions. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with limbs that moved with liquid grace. But it was her eyes that made Minho's blood turn to ice. She had 4 of them, arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and they were all staring directly at him with an expression of pure hatred. She walked across the chamber floor, her long robes flowing behind her like water. Every step echoed in the silence. Alien representatives moved out of her way, bowing respectfully as she passed. Minho had read about the Alterian Empire in his briefings. They controlled dozens of star systems and commanded the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. Queen Nari herself was said to be over 200 years old. Though she looked no older than 30 by human standards, she stopped directly in front of the human delegation's platform. Minho found himself standing up without realizing it, drawn by some invisible force. The Queen's 4 eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. Then she spoke, and Minho's world completely fell apart. "That human," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the enormous chamber, despite speaking in a normal tone, "is my former husband, who abandoned me and our unborn child 15 years ago." The words hit Minho like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his mind reeling. The Queen had spoken in perfect Korean with an accent that reminded him of his own mother, but that was impossible. He had never seen this alien queen before in his life. He had never even left Earth's solar system until this diplomatic mission. The chamber erupted into chaos. Alien representatives began talking excitedly in dozens of different languages. Translators scrambled to process what they had heard. The human delegation stared at Minho in shock and confusion. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Su Jin said, rising from her seat with diplomatic training taking over, "there must be some mistake. Captain Minho has never—" "Silence!" Queen Nari's voice boomed across the chamber, and everyone fell quiet again. Her luminescent skin now pulsed with angry red patterns. "I know his face. I know his voice. I know the way he smells and the sound of his heartbeat when he sleeps." Minho felt like he was trapped in a nightmare. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never met you before. I've never been to your planet. I don't know what you're talking about." The Queen's expression shifted slightly, and for just a moment, Minho saw something that looked like pain in her alien eyes. "Do you truly not remember me, Minho? Do you not remember the promises you made, the child we created together?" Minho's legs felt weak as Queen Nari activated a small device from her ornate belt. The air above her hand shimmered, and suddenly, a three-dimensional image appeared floating in the space between them. It was like watching a movie, but the hologram was so clear and realistic that Minho felt like he could reach out and touch it. The image showed a human man who looked exactly like Minho, standing in what appeared to be a beautiful garden. The plants were unlike anything on Earth, with leaves that glowed softly, and flowers that seemed to move on their own. The man in the hologram was wearing strange ceremonial clothes and holding hands with a younger version of Queen Nari. They were both smiling as they exchanged what looked like wedding rings, though the rings seemed to be made of some kind of living light. "This was our bonding ceremony," Queen Nari said, her voice now quieter but still carrying to every corner, "of the massive chamber. 15 Earth years ago, when you first came to our world as an ambassador of peace." Minho stared at the hologram in complete shock. The man's face was identical to his own, down to the smallest detail. Same nose, same eyes, even the same small scar on his left eyebrow that he had gotten falling off his bicycle as a child. But Minho knew with absolute certainty that he had never been in that garden, never worn those clothes, never met this alien queen. "This is impossible," he whispered, but his voice carried in the silent chamber. Queen Nari waved her hand, and the hologram changed. Now it showed the same man, the same face in what looked like private moments, eating strange alien food and laughing, walking through a city with buildings that twisted up into the sky like frozen tornadoes. Lying in bed next to the Queen, both of them looking peaceful and happy. Each new image felt like a punch to Minho's stomach. The other aliens in the chamber were watching with intense interest, their various eyes, tentacles, and other sensory organs focused on the drama unfolding before them, but Queen Nari wasn't finished. She touched another control on her device, and now the hologram showed scientific data. DNA sequences that meant nothing to Minho, but clearly meant everything to the alien scientists present. Blood samples, fingerprints, even brain scans that matched his own medical records perfectly. "Your own body confirms the truth," the Queen said. "Every cell, every gene, every unique marker that makes you who you are. This data was taken during your time on our world." Arbitrator Velka, the Council. Mediator floated forward on his platform. He looked like a jellyfish made of silver light, beautiful and alien in a way that usually filled Minho with wonder. Now he just felt sick to his stomach. "Captain Minho," Velka's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "These records appear to be authentic. Our best scientists have examined them and found no evidence of tampering or fraud. How do you explain this contradiction?" Minho looked around desperately at his fellow humans. Ambassador Sujin's face had gone completely white. The other members of their delegation were staring at him like he had suddenly grown a second head. He could see fear in their eyes, not just confusion but real terror about what this meant for Earth's first contact with alien civilizations. "I don't know how to explain it," Minho said, his voice cracking slightly. "I swear on my mother's grave, I have never left Earth's solar system before this mission. I was born in Seoul, grew up there, went to university there. I have witnesses, records, photos of my entire life. I don't understand how this is possible. For the first time since entering the chamber, Queen Nari's expression showed something other than anger or certainty. Her four eyes studied his face carefully, and Minho saw confusion flickering across her luminescent features. "Your scent," she said softly, stepping closer to him. "The way you smell, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the exact tone of your voice when you're afraid. Everything is exactly as I remember from those nights when you held me and promised you would never leave." She paused, and her skin shifted from angry red to a softer blue color that somehow looked sad. "But there is something different too," she admitted. "Something in your eyes, the way you look at me. When you left our world, you knew our customs, spoke our language. You understood the sacred nature of our bond. Now you look at me like a stranger." The chamber remained deadly quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Minho felt like he was drowning in confusion and fear. How could he prove something hadn't happened when all the evidence said it had? That's when Ambassador Su Jin stepped forward and did something that changed everything. "Your Majesty," she said, her diplomatic training keeping her voice steady despite the circumstances, "there may be information that could help explain this situation, but we need to speak privately with Captain Minho first." Queen Nari's eyes narrowed. "You think to deceive me further?" "No deception," Su Jin replied firmly, "but there are classified aspects of Captain Minho's recruitment for this mission that may be relevant. Give us 1 hour to review his files completely." The arbitrator considered this request while the chamber buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of alien languages. 1 hour, Velka finally decided. But Captain Minho will remain under council supervision during this time. As the human delegation was escorted to a private chamber, Su Jin grabbed Minho's arm and pulled him close. "There's something we never told you about your recruitment for this mission," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Your personnel files, they may not tell the complete story about who you really are." The secured chamber felt like a prison cell to Minho, even though it was furnished with comfortable chairs and had a beautiful view of the alien city outside. The walls were made of some kind of material that shimmered like water, and Ambassador Su Jin had explained that it would prevent anyone from listening in on their conversation. But Minho barely noticed any of that. He was too busy trying to process what felt like his entire world falling apart. Su Jin sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past hour. The other members of their diplomatic team stood around the room, all of them avoiding eye contact with Minho. Their faces showed a mixture of guilt and fear that made his stomach turn. "I need you to sit down for this," Su Jin said quietly. "I am sitting down," Minho replied, though he felt like standing up and pacing around the room. His hands were shaking, and he kept clenching and unclenching his fists. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear," she continued. "It's classified at the highest levels of Earth Command. Only a handful of people in the entire world know the truth." Minho felt his heart racing. "Just tell me. Please, I need to understand what's happening to me." Su Jin took a deep breath. 15 years ago, Earth discovered that we weren't alone in the universe. We detected alien communication signals and realized that there were advanced civilizations out there. The government decided to send a secret advance scout to make contact before we announced anything to the public. She paused, studying Minho's face carefully. That scout was a young Korean diplomat named Minho. He was brave, intelligent, and had a gift for languages. He was also your twin brother. The words hit Minho like a punch to the chest. He felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "My what, your twin brother?" Su Jin repeated gently. "You were both born during the chaos of the Korean War refugee crisis. Your birth parents couldn't care for 2 babies, so they were forced to give you both away to different families. Both families, not knowing about the other child, named their adopted sons Minho. Minho's mind reeled. He thought about his childhood, his adoptive parents who had died when he was in college, all the times he had felt like something was missing from his life. "You're telling me I had a brother? A twin brother? And nobody ever told me?" "The families didn't know about each other," Su Jin explained. "It was only when Earth Command was recruiting for the alien contact mission that their background checks discovered the connection. Your brother had all the right qualifications, but they also found you. You were kept as a backup, just in case something went wrong." "And something did go wrong," Minho said, his voice barely above a whisper. Su Jin nodded sadly. "Your brother successfully made contact with the Alterians. He lived on their world for several months, learned their language and customs. He even married their queen, just as she showed us today. But then there was an accident." She pulled out a small tablet and showed Minho an official report marked with the highest security classifications. His shuttle crashed during a routine diplomatic mission to one of the Alterian colony worlds. He died instantly. The Alterians were devastated, especially Queen Nari. But Earth Command was terrified about what this might mean for future relations with alien species. Minho stared at the report, trying to process the information. The shuttle accident had happened almost exactly 14 years ago, just a few months after his brother's marriage to the alien queen. So they covered it up, he said. They had to, Sujin replied. Think about it from their perspective. Humanity's first contact with aliens ends with our ambassador dying in an accident. It could have started a war or convinced the aliens that humans were too dangerous to deal with. So they told the Alterians that your brother had been called back to Earth for urgent family business, and they let Queen Nari think he had abandoned her. It was supposed to be temporary, Sujin said defensively. They planned to send another diplomat to explain eventually, but then the Alterians closed their borders and refused all contact with humans for over a decade, until recently, when they agreed to this diplomatic summit. Minho felt sick, and that's where I come in. Earth Command has been preparing you for this possibility for years, she admitted. All those special training programs you thought were just career advancement, the language lessons, the cultural studies, the diplomatic protocols. They were grooming you to take your brother's place if the opportunity ever arose. You turned me into a replacement for a man I never even knew existed. We gave you the skills to prevent an interstellar war, Sujin said firmly. Your brother's death could still cause massive problems if Queen Nari learns the truth. She clearly loved him deeply, and she's been carrying the pain of his supposed betrayal for 15 years. Minho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, alien vehicles moved through the sky like schools of fish, and beings from dozens of different worlds went about their daily lives. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What am I supposed to do now, he asked. Pretend to be him? Lie to that queen about who I am? We don't know yet, Sujin replied honestly. But we need to be very careful. Queen Nari isn't just any alien leader. The Alterian Empire is one of the most powerful forces in this part of the galaxy. If she decides that humans can't be trusted, it could doom Earth's chances of joining the galactic community. Meanwhile, in her own private chambers elsewhere in the council building, Queen Nari was experiencing her own confusion. As she sat, in meditation, trying to process the encounter with the human who claimed not to know her, strange flashes of memory kept intruding on her thoughts. She remembered Minho's face clearly, but sometimes when she tried to recall specific conversations they had shared, the details seemed fuzzy or inconsistent. It was like trying to remember a dream that kept slipping away. General Tai Sung, her most trusted military advisor, knelt beside her meditation platform. His own blue skin was marked with the ritual scars that indicated his high rank in Alterian society, Your Majesty, he said in their native language. You seem troubled by today's events. Something feels wrong, Tai Sung, Nari replied. The human's face is exactly as I remember, but his behavior is completely different. It's as if he has become a different person entirely. Humans are naturally deceitful creatures, Tai Sung said, his voice filled with disdain. Perhaps this is simply how they truly are when they think they can escape the consequences of their actions. Nari frowned, but he seemed genuinely confused. The fear in his eyes appeared real. Human emotions are easy to fake, the general assured her. Remember what they did to you. Remember the pain of abandonment you carried all these years. This is proof that no human can ever be trusted. But even as Nari nodded in agreement, part of her mind wondered why her memories of Minho sometimes felt more like stories someone had told her rather than experiences she had actually lived. 3. Days had passed since the shocking revelation in the council chambers, and Minho felt like he was living in a nightmare that wouldn't end. The Galactic Council had given both sides time to prepare their arguments, but Minho knew that time was running out. If he couldn't prove his innocence, Earth's first contact with alien civilizations would end in disaster. That's when he met Dr. Hyewon. She approached him in the council's public garden, a beautiful space filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. Dr. Hyewon was Alterian like Queen Nari, but smaller and more delicate-looking. Her blue skin had silver patterns that reminded Minho of circuit boards, and her 4 eyes held an intelligence that made him feel like she could see right through him. Captain Minho, she said, in accented but clear English. I believe you. Telling the truth, Minho looked around nervously. Why would you help me? I'm a stranger to you. Because I am a scientist, Dr. HFY replied simply, and scientists seek truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be. She led him to a secluded corner of the garden where strange flowering vines created a natural privacy screen. From her robes, she pulled out a small device that looked like a combination of a tablet and a piece of jewelry. I have been studying Queen Nari's medical records, she explained quietly. As the royal physician, I have access to brain scans dating back 20 years. What I found troubles me greatly. The device projected a three-dimensional image of a brain floating in the air between them. Minho didn't understand most of what he was seeing, but even he could tell that something looked wrong. Parts of the brain were highlighted in different colors, and there were strange patterns that seemed out of place. This is Her Majesty's brain from 15 years ago, just after your brother's supposed departure, Dr. HFY explained. Notice these areas here and here. She pointed to sections that glowed with an unnatural red light. These are signs of neural manipulation. Someone has been altering her memories. Minho felt his heart racing. You mean someone has been messing with her mind? More than that, Dr. HFY said grimly. They have been systematically replacing her real memories with false ones. Look at this pattern here. It shows repeated interventions over many years. Someone has been feeding her artificial memories bit by bit, making her believe things that never actually happened. She changed the image to show a comparison between the Queen's current brain patterns and what they should look like naturally. Technology required for this level of neural manipulation is incredibly advanced, she continued. Only a few individuals in our entire empire have access to it, and all of them work directly for General Tae-sung. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in Minho's mind, but the picture they formed was more horrifying than he had imagined. You're saying General Tae-sung has been controlling the Queen's memories for 15 years? I believe so, Dr. HFY nodded sadly. He has been positioning himself as her protector and most trusted advisor, while systematically poisoning her mind against humans. Every doubt she might have had about your brother's disappearance was erased and replaced with certainty of betrayal. Minho thought about his conversation with Ambassador Su Jin. But why would he do that? What does he gain from making the Queen hate humans? Dr. HFY's expression grew even more serious. General Tae-sung has always believed that the Alterian Empire should expand aggressively across the galaxy. He sees other species as either potential slaves or threats to be eliminated. But Queen Nari has traditionally favored diplomacy over conquest. She pulled up another set of data on her device, showing military deployment records and resource allocation reports. If the Queen could be convinced that humans are naturally treacherous and dangerous, she might authorize a preemptive strike against Earth. That would give Tae-sung the war he has always wanted, and it would establish a precedent for attacking other worlds that refuse to submit to Alterian rule. The full scope of the conspiracy was staggering, so he killed my brother and then spent years brainwashing the Queen to justify starting a war. That is my theory, Dr. HFY confirmed, but proving it will be extremely dangerous. General Tae-sung has loyal followers throughout the military and government. If he discovers what we know, he will likely eliminate us as threats. Despite the danger, Minho knew they had to act. Too many lives were at stake to let this conspiracy continue. We need to show this evidence to Queen Nari, he said. I have already tried, Dr. HFY replied sadly. I requested a private audience yesterday and presented some of my preliminary findings. She refused to believe me. What did she say? That General Tae-sung has been her most loyal advisor since childhood, that he helped her through the darkest period of her life after your brother's betrayal. She cannot imagine that he would deceive her about something so important. Minho understood the Queen's position, but he also knew they were running out of time. We have to try again. Maybe if we work together we can make her see the truth, Dr. HFY agreed, though she looked worried. There is one more thing you should know. My research suggests that the neural manipulation has been getting stronger recently. I believe General Tae-sung is preparing for something big. Perhaps he plans to push the Queen into declaring war very soon. That evening, they managed to arrange a secret meeting with Queen Nari in her private chambers. The room was beautiful, but alien, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal and furniture. that adjusted itself automatically to whoever was sitting on it. But Minho barely noticed the surroundings. He was focused entirely on the Queen's face as Dr. HFY presented the evidence. At first, Nari listened politely but skeptically. As the data became more damning, her expression grew angry. "This is impossible," she declared, her skin flashing with agitated red patterns. "Tae-sung has been like a father to me. He protected me when I was vulnerable. He helped me understand the truth about human nature." "Your Majesty," Minho said gently, "what if he didn't help you understand the truth? What if he created a false truth to serve his own purposes?" "You would say anything to save yourself and your species," Nari replied coldly. "Maybe," Minho admitted. "But deep down, don't you feel like something isn't right? Haven't you ever wondered why your memories of my brother sometimes feel unclear or inconsistent?" For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across the Queen's alien features, but then her expression hardened again. "Leave my chambers immediately, both of you. I will not listen to these lies about someone who has served me faithfully for decades." As they were escorted out by the royal guards, Dr. HFY whispered to Minho, "She is fighting the programming, but it is very strong. We may need to find another way to reach her." But Minho had seen that brief moment of doubt in the Queen's eyes. He knew that somewhere deep inside, the real Nari was still there, struggling to break free from 15 years of manipulation, the Sci. Question was whether they could reach her before General Tae-sung's plan reached its deadly conclusion. The decision to undergo the memory restoration procedure was the hardest choice Queen Nari had ever made. She sat in Dr. HFY's secret laboratory, hidden deep beneath the medical wing of the council building, staring at the strange helmet-like device that would either reveal the truth or potentially destroy her mind completely. "Are you certain about this, Your Majesty?" Dr. HFY asked for the third time, her 4 eyes filled with concern. "The neural pathways that have been altered are deeply embedded. Reversing 15 years of conditioning could cause permanent brain damage, or worse." Nari's hands trembled as she reached for the device. "I have to know," she whispered. "These past few days I keep having dreams that don't match my memories. I see Minho's face, but he's saying things that contradict what I remember. I see places and people that feel familiar, but I can't place them in my timeline." Minho knelt beside her chair, his human face showing the same worry that Dr. HFY displayed. "We don't have to do this. Maybe there's another way to prove what really happened." "No," Nari said firmly, though her voice shook. "If General Tae-sung has been manipulating my mind for all these years, then I need to know. I need to remember who I really am, not who he wants me to be." Dr. HFY began connecting sensors to Nari's temples while explaining the process. "I'm going to start by targeting the oldest altered memories first. The procedure will feel like living through experiences in fast forward. Some of it may be confusing or painful, but you must try to let the memories flow naturally." As the machine hummed to life, Nari closed her 4 eyes and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. The first sensation was like a mild electric shock. Then suddenly her mind was flooded with images and emotions that felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. She saw herself as a much younger queen, nervous and excited about meeting the first human ambassador. But this memory was different from what she had always believed. In this version, she wasn't suspicious or afraid of the human. Instead, she was curious and hopeful about what this meeting might mean for both their species. Then, she saw her first conversation with the original Minho, and the difference from her programmed memories was staggering. The real Minho had been gentle and respectful, spending hours learning about Alterian culture and customs. He had asked permission before every interaction, shown genuine interest in her people's history, and treated her as an equal rather than a conquest to be won. "Oh," Nari gasped, her body trembling as more authentic memories surfaced. "He was so kind. Why did I remember him as arrogant and demanding?" The memories kept coming, each one more beautiful and painful than the last. She remembered long walks through the royal gardens, where Minho would tell her stories about Earth, and she would teach him about the philosophy of her people. She remembered the moment she realized she was falling in love with this strange, wonderful human who saw her as a person rather than just a political alliance. Their bonding ceremony hadn't been the cold, political arrangement she remembered. It had been a celebration filled with joy and genuine affection. Minho had learned traditional Alterian poetry and recited it perfectly during the ritual, bringing tears to her eyes with his dedication to honoring her culture. But the most devastating memory was their final conversation, before he left for the diplomatic mission to the colony world. In her programmed memories, Minho had been distant and eager to leave. In reality, he had been excited about their future together. "I can't wait to get this mission finished," the real Minho had said, holding her hands in his as they stood on the balcony of her private chambers. "When I get back, we can start planning for our child's future. I want to create a universe where human and Alterian children can grow up together, learning from both cultures." Nari's eyes snapped open, tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. He was excited about the baby. He wanted to be a father. He never planned to abandon us. "What else do you remember?" Dr. Haiwan asked gently, monitoring the brain scans, to ensure the procedure wasn't causing damage. Nari closed her eyes again, diving deeper into the restored memories. What she found there made her gasp in shock and horror. She remembered giving birth to a beautiful daughter who had both human and Alterian features. The baby's skin had a soft blue tint like her mother's, but her facial structure was more human. She had 2 eyes instead of 4, but they were larger and more expressive than typical human eyes. "I named her Jiwon," Nari whispered, her voice breaking. "She was so perfect, so beautiful. But then, the memory that came next was like a knife to her heart." She remembered General Tae-sung entering her recovery room, his face grave with fake sorrow. "Your Majesty," he had said, "I have tragic news. The human Minho has died in a shuttle accident, and I'm afraid the shock has been too much for your daughter." The medical team did everything they could, but her hybrid physiology couldn't handle the trauma. She passed away peacefully in her sleep. But now, with her memories restored, Nari could see the lies in his expression. She remembered feeling confused about the timing, wondering how her newborn daughter could have known about her father's death. She remembered asking to see Ji-won's body and being told it had already been cremated according to ancient customs that she had never heard of. "She didn't die," Nari said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Tae-sung lied about that too. My daughter is alive somewhere." Minho squeezed her shoulder supportively. "We'll find her, I promise you that." As more memories flooded back, Nari began to understand the full scope of General Tae-sung's manipulation. He had used her grief over Minho's death and the supposed loss of her daughter to gradually poison her mind against all humans. Every doubt she expressed, every moment of healing or hope, was systematically erased and replaced with anger and bitterness. "He's been controlling me for 15 years, she said, her skin now pulsing with furious patterns of red and gold. "He took my husband, my daughter, my memories, my very identity. He turned me into a weapon against innocent people." Dr. Haiwan suddenly looked up from her monitoring equipment, her expression alarmed. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. The procedure is being detected by the palace security systems. Someone is trying to trace our location." As if summoned by her words, the laboratory's doors burst open. General Tae-sung strode in, followed by a squad of armed guards. His expression was cold and calculating, showing no surprise at finding. "To them there." "Your Majesty," he said in a voice that dripped with false concern, "you shouldn't be subjecting yourself to these dangerous experiments. These criminals are clearly trying to damage your mind with their primitive human technology." But Nari was no longer the confused, manipulated queen he had controlled for so long. She stood up slowly, her restored memories giving her a strength and clarity she hadn't felt in years. "The only criminal in this room," she said, her voice carrying the full authority of her royal position, "is you, Tae-sung. I remember everything. Now I remember what you stole from me." The general's confident expression faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Guards, arrest these traitors for crimes against the crown." But Nari stepped between the guards and her allies. "I am still your queen," she declared, "and I order you to arrest General Tae-sung for treason, murder, and crimes against the royal family." The guards hesitated, torn between their loyalty to their queen and their fear of the powerful general. In that moment of uncertainty, alarms began blaring throughout the building. "It seems," General Taesung said with a cold smile, "that this conversation will have to continue elsewhere. My loyal forces are already securing the building. Your Majesty will come with me, and we will discuss these confusion in a more appropriate setting." Nari realized that the conspiracy ran deeper than she had imagined, and their fight for the truth was just beginning. The confrontation in Queen Nari's palace throne room felt like something out of a nightmare. General Taesung stood at the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by soldiers who had served him loyally for decades. His blue skin was marked with war paint in ancient patterns, and his four eyes burned with a fanatical intensity that made Minho's blood run cold. 15 years I have protected this empire," Taesung declared, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. 15 years I have guided your Majesty away from the weakness that nearly destroyed our people, and now you want to throw it all away for the lies of these human parasites." Queen Nari stood on her throne platform, but she was no longer the confused and manipulated ruler she had been just hours before. Her restored memories had awakened something fierce and powerful within her. Her skin glowed with patterns of gold and silver that Minho had never seen before, marking her as a true warrior queen of her people. "You speak of protection," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority, "but you are the one who has been destroying our empire from within. You murdered my husband, stole my daughter, and turned me into a puppet for your warmongering ambitions." "General," Taesung laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your husband was weak, just like all humans. He filled your head with foolish ideas about peace and cooperation. The universe is not a place for the weak, Your Majesty. Only the strong survive, and only the ruthless prosper." He gestured to his soldiers, who raised their weapons toward the small group of allies surrounding the throne. Dr. Haiwon pressed closer to Minho, her scientific equipment clutched protectively against her chest. Commander Dong-woo, the one military officer who had remained loyal to the Queen, positioned himself between his monarch and the traitors. "The human species is a disease," Taesung continued, his eyes fixed on Minho with pure hatred. "They spread their weakness wherever they go, convincing other species to lower their guard, to trust instead of conquer. If we allow them to live, they will corrupt every civilization in the galaxy." Minho stepped forward despite Commander Dongwoo's whispered warning to stay back. "You're wrong about humans," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. "Yes, we believe in cooperation and peace, but that doesn't make us weak. It makes us strong in ways you can't understand." "Prove it," Taesung sneered. "Show me this human strength you speak of." That's when the general revealed his final, most devastating weapon. From his robes he produced a small holographic projector. The image that appeared above it made Queen Nari gasp in shock and Minho's knees nearly buckle. It showed a young girl, maybe 14 or 15 years old, sitting in what looked like a prison cell. She had her mother's luminescent blue skin, but her facial features were distinctly human. Her two large eyes were filled with fear and confusion. "Princess Ji-won," Nari whispered, reaching toward the hologram as if she could touch her daughter. "Through the projection, she is alive and well," Taesung said with cruel satisfaction. "She has been my guest for all these years. I told her that her mother had died giving birth to her, and that her human father had abandoned them both. She believes I am the only family she has left." The Queen's skin flashed through every color Minho had ever seen in Alterian display, from deep red anger to blue grief to silver determination. "Where is she?" "Safe," Taesung replied. "On a mining station at the edge of our territory, far from any rescue attempt. She will remain safe as long as Your Majesty cooperates with my plans for dealing with the human threat." "What do you want?" Nari asked, though Minho could see she already knew the answer. "Declare war on Earth," the general demanded. "Use their betrayal of our royal family as justification. Lead the Alterian fleet in a glorious conquest that will eliminate the human weakness from our galaxy forever. Do this, and you will see your daughter again. Refuse, and she will suffer the same fate as her father." The throne room fell silent, except for the hum of alien technology and the distant sounds of the city outside. Minho watched Queen Nari's face as she wrestled with an impossible choice: Save her daughter by condemning his entire species to death, or protect Earth and lose the child she had just discovered was still alive. "I need time to consider," Nari said finally. "You have 1 hour," Taesung replied. "Then I expect your decision. Choose wisely, Your Majesty. The fate of more than one world hangs in the balance." As the general and his soldiers filed out of the throne room, Minho approached the queen. She was staring at the space where her daughter's hologram had been, tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "We'll get her back," Minho said quietly. "I don't know how, but we'll find a way." Nari turned to look at him, and he saw something in her expression that reminded him of his brother's descriptions of Alterian warrior culture. "You would risk your life to save my daughter, a child you have never met?" "Yes," Minho replied, without hesitation. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because no child should be used as a weapon against their own mother." Dr. Haiwan stepped forward, her tablet already displaying star charts and technical specifications. "I may have an idea about where Princess Ji-won is being held. There are only 3 mining stations remote enough for the general's purposes, and I have access to the transportation schedules." Commander Dong-woo joined their huddle, his scarred face grim but determined. "I can gather a small team of soldiers, still loyal to the true crown. Not many, but enough for a rescue mission if we plan carefully." Queen Nari looked at each of them in turn, these unlikely allies who were willing to risk everything to help her reclaim her daughter and stop a war. "This will be incredibly dangerous. Taesung will have the station heavily guarded, and if we fail, he will kill Ji-won immediately." "Then we don't fail," Minho said simply. Over the next 30 minutes, they formulated a desperate plan. Dr. Haiwan would use her medical clearances to get them past the outer security checkpoints. Commander Dongwoo's loyal soldiers would provide military support. Minho would contribute what he was already thinking of as human unpredictability, the ability to think outside standard military tactics. As they prepared to leave the palace, through secret passages that had been used by Nari's ancestors during ancient wars, the queen pulled Minho aside. "Your brother would be proud of you," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "During our time together, he often spoke about humanity's greatest strength. He said it wasn't your technology or your intelligence, but your refusal to abandon those in need, even when helping them puts you in danger." Minho felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the alien climate. "I wish I could have met him." "You carry his spirit," Nari replied. "I can see it in your actions, in your willingness to fight for people you barely know. That is the gift your species brings to the galaxy, the reminder that strength comes not from conquest, but from compassion." As they slipped through the darkened corridors toward their waiting transport, Minho realized that this mission was about more than just saving one girl or preventing a war. It was about proving that the human way of life, messy, emotional, and sometimes inefficient as it might be, had a place among the stars. The hunt for Princess Ji-won was about to begin, and with it, the fight for the soul of the galaxy itself. The mining station hung in space like a massive metal spider, its long drilling arms extending toward the asteroid field below. Minho pressed his face against the transport ship's window, studying the structure as they approached. It looked heavily fortified, with weapon platforms and patrol ships circling it in regular patterns. "Alterian military doctrine is very predictable," Commander Dongwoo explained as he reviewed the station's defenses on his tactical display. "They will expect a frontal assault with overwhelming force. They have positioned their strongest weapons to repel that kind of attack." "Then we don't give them what they expect," Minho replied, his mind already working through possibilities that would have seemed crazy to traditional military thinking. Dr. Haiwan had managed to get them past the outer checkpoints by claiming they were delivering emergency medical supplies to the station. Her credentials were legitimate, and the guards had no reason to suspect that the medical team included a human infiltrator and a squad of loyalist soldiers hidden in the cargo bay. "Phase 1 is complete," she announced, as they docked at the station's medical bay. "But from here we're on our own." Minho's plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Instead of trying to fight their way through the station's defenses, they would use the facility's own systems against it. The mining station operated on automated schedules, with computer systems controlling everything from life support to the movement of heavy equipment. Humans have something we call thinking outside the box, Minho explained to his alien allies as they made their way through the station's service tunnels. It means looking for solutions that don't follow normal patterns. He had studied the station's layout during their approach and noticed something the Alterian designers had overlooked. The prison section where G1 was being held was located directly above the main ore processing facility. If they could trigger a malfunction in the processing systems, it would create enough chaos to cover their rescue attempt. "This is insane," Commander Dongwu muttered as Minho began rewiring the control systems. "If you make a mistake, you could bring down the entire section." "If I don't try, we'll never reach G1 anyway," Minho replied, his hands working quickly with tools Dr. Haiwan had provided. When the ore processors suddenly reversed direction and began spewing processed metals throughout the facility, the station's emergency alarms created exactly the distraction Minho had hoped for. Guards rushed to contain what they thought was a catastrophic equipment failure, leaving the prison section lightly defended. They found Princess G1 in a cell that was comfortable but clearly designed to prevent escape. She was sitting on a simple bed, reading from a holographic book when Queen Nari appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither mother nor daughter moved, as if afraid that acknowledging each other would make this moment disappear. G1 had grown into a beautiful young woman who perfectly blended human and Alterian features. Her skin had the same luminescent blue quality as her mother's, but her facial structure was more human. She had 2 large, expressive eyes instead of 4, and her movements had a grace that reminded Minho of both species. "Mother," G1 whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Is it really you?" Queen Nari rushed forward and wrapped her daughter in her arms, both of them crying tears of joy and relief. "My precious child," Nari sobbed. "I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you forever." "General Taisung told me you died giving birth to me," G1 said, her voice mixing happiness with years of suppressed anger. "He said my father abandoned us, and that you never got to hold me." "All lies," Nari replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "I held you every day for the first 3 months of your life. You were the most beautiful baby I had ever seen." Minho watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and urgency. They had found G1, but they were still trapped on an enemy station with limited time before their presence was discovered. "We need to go," Commander Dongwu warned, monitoring his communication device. "The guards are starting to realize that the equipment malfunction was deliberate." As they made their way toward the escape route Dr. Haiwan had mapped out, G1 kept looking at Minho with curiosity. "You look like someone I've seen in pictures," she said, "but that's impossible." "I'll explain everything when we're safe," Minho promised. "Right now we need to focus on getting off this station." That's when General Taesung's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "Attention, all personnel." His announcement boomed from speakers throughout the facility. "We have intruders attempting to steal valuable property belonging to the Empire. All guards are authorized to use lethal force." But worse than the increased security was what came next. "Since these criminals have chosen to interfere with Imperial business," Taesung continued, "I am activating the station's self-destruct sequence. This facility will be destroyed in 10 minutes to prevent sensitive information from falling into enemy hands." The lights in the corridor shifted to emergency red, and a mechanical countdown began echoing through the station. Minho felt his heart sink as he realized the general was willing to destroy everything, including his own soldiers, rather than let them escape with the truth. "He's lost his mind," Dr. Haiwan gasped. "There are over 200 people on this station." Commander Dongwu was already calculating distances and escape routes. "The nearest transport bay is 5 minutes away if we run, but the docking procedures alone will take longer than we have." Minho looked at Queen Nari and her daughter, then at his alien allies who had risked everything to help them. An idea began forming in his mind, but it would require him to stay behind while the others escaped. "Take G1 and go," he told the Queen, pointing toward the transport bay. "I can override the self-destruct from the main control room, but someone needs to get to the manual controls. It's in the opposite direction." "No," Nari said immediately, her luminescent skin flashing with determination. "I won't lose another Minho. Your brother died because he was alone and had no backup. We leave together, or not at all." Ji-won looked between her mother and this human who had risked his life to save her. "What my mother means," she said with a smile that reminded Minho of both her parents, "is that we're family now, and family doesn't abandon each other." Looking at their faces, Minho realized that the most human thing he could do wasn't to sacrifice himself heroically. It was to trust his friends and work together to find a solution that saved everyone. "All right," he said, his mind already working on a new plan. "Then let's figure out how to beat this thing together." The countdown continued echoing through the station, but Minho no longer felt hopeless. He had learned something important about the difference between human strength and human stubbornness, and sometimes the two were exactly the same thing. Working together, they had managed to stop the station's self-destruct sequence with less than 30 seconds to spare. Minho's understanding of human engineering principles, combined with Dr. Haiwon's knowledge of Alterian technology and Commander Dongwu's military expertise, had created a solution none of them could have found alone. But their greatest victory came when they cornered General Tae-sung in the station's command center, surrounded by evidence of his 15-year conspiracy. Now, 3 days later, Minho stood once again in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. But this time everything was different. Instead of being accused of crimes he didn't commit, he was watching as the real criminal faced justice for his actions. General Tae-sung sat in a containment field at the center of the chamber, his once proud military bearing broken by the weight of his exposed crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Dr. Haiwon's brain scans proved the memory manipulation. The rescued Princess Ji-won provided testimony about her years of imprisonment. Commander Dongwu's loyal soldiers had found records of the shuttle sabotage that killed the original Minho Queen Nari stood at the speaker's platform, her luminescent skin glowing with calm authority as she addressed the assembled representatives from dozens of worlds. Her daughter sat in the royal section, wearing simple clothes but holding herself with the dignity of someone who had survived years of lies and emerged stronger for it. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," Nari began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "I stand before you today to correct a grave injustice and to reveal the truth about the conspiracy that nearly led our species to war." She gestured toward Minho, who sat with the Earth delegation. "This human, Captain Minho, represents everything that is noble about his species. When faced with accusations he could not understand, he did not respond with anger or violence. Instead, he sought truth through cooperation and understanding." The Queen's testimony was powerful and detailed. She explained how General Tae-sung had murdered her husband, stolen her child, and spent 15 years manipulating her memories to create hatred toward humanity. She described Minho's bravery during the rescue mission, how he had been willing to sacrifice himself to save people he barely knew. "He risked his life to save my daughter," Nari continued, "asked for nothing in return, and showed me that honor transcends species boundaries. Through his actions I learned that my original assessment of humanity was correct. They are not weak or treacherous. They are strong in ways that those who worship only power cannot understand." When it came time for General Tae-sung to speak, in his own defense, his words only made his crimes seem worse. He showed no remorse for the lives he had destroyed, no regret for the war he had tried to start. Instead, he continued to insist that his actions were justified. "Weakness is a disease," he declared, his voice echoing with fanatical certainty. "The Alterian Empire should rule the galaxy through strength, not through these pathetic alliances with inferior species. I did what needed to be done to preserve our superiority. The Council's judgment was swift and unanimous. General Tae-sung was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, treason, and attempted genocide. He would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison on a remote world, with no possibility of parole. But for Minho, the most meaningful moment came after the formal proceedings ended. Princess Ji-won approached him in the chamber's quiet garden area, where he was sitting alone trying to process everything that had happened. "Uncle Minho," she said, using the Korean term for a respected family friend. "You don't have to call me that," Minho replied. I know this whole situation must be confusing for you. Ji-won sat down beside him, her hybrid features beautiful. In the afternoon light filtering through the garden's crystal dome, "You're not my father," she said with the typical directness of a teenager, "but your family now. My real father is gone, but he sent his brother to protect us when we needed it most." Min-ho felt tears forming in his eyes. "Your father would be so proud of you. You survived 15 years of lies and manipulation, but you never lost your ability to trust and love." "I learned that from watching my mother," Ji-won replied, "and from watching you. You could have walked away when things got dangerous, but you didn't. That's what family does. They stay even when it's hard." Over the following weeks, the Galactic Council worked to establish new protocols that would prevent the kind of deception that had nearly caused an interstellar war. The Alterian Empire agreed to a formal alliance with Earth, marking humanity's official entry into galactic civilization. Min-ho found himself appointed as Earth's first permanent ambassador to the Alterian Empire, a role that felt both overwhelming and perfectly suited to his experiences. Dr. Hai-wan was given resources to establish a joint research initiative studying the long-term effects of memory manipulation, ensuring that Tai-sung's techniques could never be used again. Commander Dongwu, who had risked his career and life to support his true queen, was promoted to head the new military cooperation program between Earth and the Alterian Empire. His first official act was to establish an exchange program where human and Alterian officers would train together, learning to combine their different approaches to problem solving. The most important change, however, was personal. Queen Nari began the long process of healing from years of manipulation, supported by her daughter's love and her new friendship with Min-ho. Together, they worked to rebuild the trust that General Tae-sung had tried so hard to destroy. "What happens now?" Min-ho asked during one of their planning sessions in the newly established embassy. "Now we build the future that your brother dreamed of," Nari replied. "A galaxy where different species work together, where children like Ji-won can grow up learning from multiple cultures, and where strength comes from cooperation rather than conquest." Ji-won, who was studying both human and Alterian history in preparation for her role as a cultural ambassador, looked up from her books. "We make sure that no one else has to go through what our family did. We prove that love and trust are stronger than fear and hatred." Min-ho realized that while he had started this journey trying to clear his name and prevent a war, he had found something much more valuable. He had found a family that transcended species boundaries and a purpose that honored his brother's memory while building a better future for everyone. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the embassy windows, full of worlds and civilizations, waiting to join the growing alliance between species who chose cooperation over conquest. And for the first time since this adventure began, Min-ho felt truly hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. 6 months had passed since the dramatic events that nearly started an interstellar war, and Min-ho could hardly believe how much his life had changed. He stood in the same massive chamber of the Galactic Council, where Queen Nari had first pointed at him and declared him her ex-husband, but now he wore the elegant formal robes of Earth's official ambassador. The fabric was woven with threads that sparkled like stars, a gift from the Alterian textile workers who had become some of Earth's first alien trading partners. The chamber was packed with representatives from over 50 different worlds, all gathered to hear humanity's proposal for new diplomatic protocols that would prevent the kind of deception and manipulation that had nearly destroyed 2 civilizations. Min-ho took a deep breath as he approached the speaker's platform, remembering how terrified he had been the last time he stood in this spot. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "6 months ago, I stood in this chamber as a confused human who had been accused of crimes I didn't understand. Today, I stand before you as someone who has learned that the universe is far more complicated and beautiful than any of us can imagine alone." He gestured toward the Earth delegation, where Ambassador Sujin sat beaming with pride. Behind her, several new human diplomats were taking notes, part of the expanded embassy staff that Earth had established after joining the galactic community. "The events that brought us here remind us that truth can be manipulated, but it cannot be destroyed," Min-ho continued. General Tae-sung spent 15 years trying to twist reality to serve his purposes, but in the end, the truth emerged because good people from different species worked together to find it. From the Alterian section, Queen Nari watched with obvious pride. She wore new royal robes that incorporated both traditional Alterian designs and patterns inspired by human art, symbolizing the cultural exchange that had blossomed between their worlds. Beside her, Princess Ji-won took careful notes on a tablet, documenting the proceedings as part of her studies in interspecies diplomacy. Ji-won had grown tremendously in the past 6 months. No longer the confused and isolated girl they had rescued from the mining station, she now served as a living symbol of cooperation between species. She split her time between Earth and the Alterian homeworld, learning languages, customs, and histories from both cultures. Her unique perspective as someone who belonged to both species had made her incredibly valuable in helping solve cultural misunderstandings before they became diplomatic problems. Trust must be built through actions, not words, Minho said, looking directly at some of the newer species representatives who were still uncertain about joining the growing alliance. Humans don't ask you to trust us because we claim to be peaceful. We ask you to judge us by what we do when faced with difficult choices. He activated a holographic display that showed statistics from the past 6 months, trade agreements between Earth and 12 different alien civilizations, joint research projects that had already produced breakthrough medical technologies, cultural exchange programs that had human students learning alien languages while alien youth studied human art and music. When Princess Ji-won was in danger, humans didn't hesitate to risk their lives to save her, even though she was a stranger to us, Minho explained. When Dr. Hai-won needed support for her memory research, human scientists immediately volunteered to share their knowledge. When Commander Dongwoo requested help training his soldiers in unconventional tactics, our military advisors gladly provided assistance. The protocol Minho was proposing was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of complex treaties filled with legal language that could be interpreted in multiple ways, it established basic principles for interspecies cooperation, transparency in all diplomatic communications, mandatory cultural exchange programs to build understanding, joint investigation, teams for any disputes that arose, and most importantly, protection for whistleblowers who exposed corruption or deception within any government. We call it the Truth and Trust Protocol, Minho announced, because those are the only foundations strong enough to build a galactic civilization that includes everyone. The debate that followed was intense but respectful. Some species worried about giving up sovereignty to international oversight. Others questioned whether such idealistic principles could work in practice. But gradually, as representatives shared their own experiences with deception and manipulation in their histories, support for the protocol began to grow. Dr. Hai-won, now the head of the Interspecies Psychological Research Institute, presented compelling evidence about how easily memories and perceptions could be manipulated without proper safeguards. Commander Dongwoo spoke about the military benefits of cooperation over conquest, citing recent joint operations that had stopped 3 different pirate fleets threatening civilian shipping lanes. When the final vote was called, the Truth and Trust Protocol passed with overwhelming support. Representatives from 47 worlds committed to implementing the new standards, with more expected to join in the coming months. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Minho found himself surrounded by his extended alien family. Queen Nari embraced him warmly, her skin glowing with happiness and pride. "Your brother would be amazed to see what you've accomplished," she said softly. "You've honored his memory by building the peaceful future he dreamed of." Ji-won bounced excitedly beside them, her tablet filled with notes and observations from the historic session. "Uncle Minho, did you see how the Crystalline Collective representatives reacted when you mentioned the cultural exchange programs? I think they're ready to open their borders for the first time in centuries." Dr. Hai-won joined their group, looking tired but satisfied after months of preparing her research presentations. "The memory protection provisions alone will save countless lives," she said. "No one should ever have to suffer what Your Majesty endured." Commander Dongwoo, resplendent in his new dress uniform that combined Alterian and human military traditions, clasped Minho's shoulder. The joint training exercises are producing remarkable results. Our soldiers are learning that strength comes in many forms. As they walked together toward the celebration reception, Minho reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them all together. He had started as a confused human facing impossible accusations, and now he was helping to shape the future of galactic civilization. "What are you thinking about?" Queen Nari asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how my brother's story didn't really end when he died," Minho replied. "It continued through all of us. Every friendship we've built, every problem we've solved together, every life we've improved. It's all part of the legacy he started." Princess G1 slipped her arm through his as they entered the reception hall, where beings from dozens of worlds were celebrating humanity's newest diplomatic achievement. "And it's just the beginning," she said with the confidence of youth and the wisdom of someone who had seen the power of truth to overcome even the darkest deceptions. "There are so many more worlds to meet, so many more friendships to build." Looking around at the diverse crowd of allies and friends, Minho knew she was right. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but it was also full of possibilities for species who chose to trust each other and work